Hello and welcome. You're listening to the Bump Podcast, a place for the believers of the unexplained, monsters, and paranormal. Join us, and we'll go face to face with what goes bump in the night. Hey there, believers. I got a great episode for you today. This week, I'm bringing on Tony Merkel. You may have heard of him from the Confessionals podcast. Pretty popular show. Tony's coming on today, and we're going to dig into his new project, The Shape of Shadows. So I look forward to that. It's going to be a lot of fun. I don't know what else we're going to get into. I don't know how long the show is going to go, but I'm here for it. I'm excited. You know, I haven't had Tony on the show before. I had like a small cameo, like, you know, small appearance on his show a couple years ago. It was like a podcaster's episode or something. There was like 5 or 6 of us on this big long 2-parter episode, and I was somewhere in the middle of that. I don't remember episode number or anything like that. But I got an email from Tony's team, and I'm happy to have him on. I can't wait to dig into it. I got a little sneak peek at The Shape of Shadows. It looks very interesting. We have mutual friends. I don't know how me and Tony have never really come together in any way. We have a lot in common, and this should turn into a really beautiful conversation, you know, Lord willing. I just look forward to it. So I'll quit babbling, and let's go ahead and bring Tony on and dig into The Shape of Shadows.
Bo, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, brother. How's it going?
Good, man. I'm glad you brought me on. This film was just it was wild, and it's been a long time coming. We shot it I think it was last June of 2022, and we're now in the fall. I think it's officially fall of 2023, and we're finally dropping it. But it was worth the wait, I think.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah, I got to see the little behind the scenes. I got to see the first look kind of preview there. Got to watch it. I loved it. You didn't really hold back on, like, when you watch stuff about Skinwalker Ranch, I get frustrated because I don't see anything happening. You know, I'll just be honest. Most of the docs, it's like they talk about that wolf. Okay, great. But your show actually gets in there, man. Like you capture stuff, you document things. It was way more than I had anticipated. I'll be honest. You know, I loved your first doc, but this one was like next level. I was super impressed, man.
Well, I mean, we just put ourselves in the environment to see what happens. So, you know, there's the aspect that people are used to where it's like commercial TV, and you get, you know what you're getting. You're getting something that's highly produced, and I mean that literally. It's produced. It's not like organic. So I mean, even reality TV is really not that reality. It's a lot of it's planned and contrived. And I just when we started doing all this stuff, I wanted to kind of go a different route and really kind of let the environment unfold around us when it comes to these videos. And so that's what we kind of pursued when it came to this film. We just wanted to put ourselves in the environment to see what happens. And that's kind of the philosophy that we had when we started the whole thing. Expedition Dogman was our first film. I didn't know what we were getting involved in, as far as, like, I knew the storyline, but, you know, going down there, I knew Ward, who's the cameraman for both films. I knew he was professional, but it was my first time working with anybody that's a professional anything, you know, like, right. I was just like, I don't know what to expect. And then there's just the crew of guys that I assembled. I thought that this was going to be like a YouTube video. I thought we were gonna go down to Kentucky, we were gonna hunt the dog man, and then put it on YouTube, and a lot of action vlog kind of thing. Like I'm holding the camera up and like, hey guys, we're out here in the Daniel Boone National Forest doing our thing. Turn off the camera and keep walking or something. But it became very apparent to me that that's not what we were in store for. And when we saw the final product, I was like, man, this is really, really good. And fortunately, I've had a lot of good people come alongside me over the years and that know better than I do. And I'm the kind of person that just because, my name is the company doesn't mean I know all. And I very much look at it as a team effort. So when like my friend, my now friend, but also coworker, Joseph Granda, he works on these films. He's the producer. He's the head of film and streaming development at Merkel Media. When he comes alongside me and suggests something, I take it to heart. And so when we put it on YouTube, and he comes alongside and he's like, hey, how long has it been up there? I'm like, oh, about a month and a half. And he's like, how many views do you have? I'm like, almost 200,000. And he's like, you should probably take that off of YouTube. Do you feel like making your investment back? I'm like, well, yeah. And he's like, you're not going to do it on YouTube. So I learned real quick what it meant to actually try to do things on a professional level when he came alongside. And he wasn't there for Expedition Dogman, but he was there for The Shape of Shadows. And so we go out there, and I'm on my way out there, but Joseph's already there. As a producer, he shows up at least a day early. He's going around collecting people's numbers, finding out who's willing to talk, who's not willing to talk, getting people to sign paperwork so they don't say, hey, I didn't say you could put me on a documentary. It's on the paperwork. You signed it. You remember we gave you some ice cream to to get you to sign it. But no, he's just been fantastic with that. And so it allows us to just kind of do what we do. And that's a huge part, is that like, it's easy to fall in the trap of making yourself feel, or people feel like this is going to be easy. But it's just, there's so much moving components to this stuff, whether it's during the shoot, before the shoot, prepping for it, or definitely post shoot. I mean, I'm learning that for sure. I mean, you shoot something, you spend a week shooting it, and it takes a while for it to even get out because it's just so much work. But having Joseph has really allowed me, Ward, and all the other guys to just really kind of sit in the environment, let it unfold around us, and to see what happens. And that may not be the best winning recipe at the end of the day, because like I said, I mean, you got TV that actually will TV is TV. It's done with an intentional purpose. I always use this example because he told me it, and I think he even said it on my show, so I think it's safe to say publicly. But Bobo from Finding Bigfoot, they were shooting an episode in Pennsylvania, and they were on a boat. It was a freshwater lake, and they saw what looked like a sea serpent. It was absolutely huge. What it was, I don't know. He doesn't know. I think Cliff even saw it. In fact, yeah, Cliff did see it, because Cliff confirmed that to me when we were speaking at the Smoky Mountain Bigfoot conference, that he was there. But they saw this sea serpent, and he tells me this story. I'm sitting in the driveway at my house in Pennsylvania before we moved, and in the Bobo fashion, yeah, man, let me tell you this. And he tells me this whole story, and I'm like, dude, why didn't that make the TV show? And he's like, because it's finding Bigfoot, not finding sea serpents. And that's the kind of stuff that I'm trying to avoid when it comes to the filmmaking. Like, listen, these films are based off of my show, and we talk about anything and everything on the show. And so if we're out there at Space Wolf Research looking for skinwalkers, and I don't know, a giant centipede comes walking up the hill at us, we're gonna film it, and we're gonna we're gonna put that out there. We're like, guess what, guys? We came out here looking for shapeshifters, and look at this giant centipede.
Bonus.
Yeah. So we just kind of let it happen, and we document the journey. And the first time and this is how I know we kind of are onto something, because we documented the first journey in Kentucky, and we had things happen to us, but not a lot of it was caught on camera, or was even able to be caught on camera. So really, we had a film where it was a bunch of guys documenting the journey of hunting this monster, talking about the things that happened to him along the way, but we did it in a professional manner that allowed people to actually consume the story and be pulled in by it. And I was like, man, if we can do that with Expedition Dogman, what happens if we actually start catching stuff on film? And that's what happened at Space Wolf Research. I mean, I couldn't believe it because you're going out there, and every time I go on a shoot, I feel the same way. I'm like, man, what if something or what if nothing happens? It's just like, gosh, I just like, because you're investing everybody's time and money, and there's it's a business. There's things on the line, and you just in your gut, you're like, man, if nothing happens, what if it's like completely boring? Like
Right.
we've invested the money in this trip, so we got to put something out. And it's just like you get nervous about that. But with the Shape of Shadows, things happen. With the second or the third film we shot out in Washington that hasn't been released yet. We don't even know what it's going to be called yet. We're calling it Project X when we talk about it, just because we don't know what we're going to call it.
Ain't Wes in that one?
Yeah. We went
Okay.
out to Ground Zero is what I'm calling it, where Wes had his Bigfoot encounter or multiple Bigfoot encounters in one night.
Yeah,
Uh,
man.
very dramatic story. And we go out there, and again, in my gut, I'm feeling like, oh man, what if nothing happens, And I'm coming into Portland on the plane, and I'm sitting next to this like professor science guy the whole way. And he early on in the flight from where was it coming from? Charlotte. So across the country, 6 hour flight or whatever it was. He early on says, "Oh, so are you on business?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm on business." And he's like, "What kind of business do you do?" I'm like, here we go. And I told him I'm a documentary filmmaker, and he's like, "Oh, okay, that's fantastic and stuff." And he starts talking about his science stuff and his professor stuff, and he's like, "What kind of documentaries are you doing?" I was like, "Oh, you had to ask that question." I said, "Actually, we're going to hunt Bigfoot," and he's like, "Oh, okay." It's like not interested. And then he tried doing small talk with me, and I'm the kind of person like, well, I'm a one trick pony. I got what I talk about. And so if you're gonna ask me questions, I'm just gonna answer the way I would answer anybody.
Yep.
And so our conversations didn't go very far. And then we're coming in for a landing in the Portland area. Leave it open. We're coming in for a landing in the Portland area. And we're flying by Mount Hood. And I don't know if he was trying to make up for lack of talk for 6 hours, but he taps me on my shoulder and he points out Mount Hood. And he's like, "That's Mount Hood," because he's from that area. And I was like, "Really?" And he's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Isn't it beautiful?" I'm like, "Oh, it's absolutely beautiful. I'm actually going to be going there tonight." And he's like, "Really?" And I said, "Yeah, there's this lady who saw this Bigfoot and kind of bent over backwards and walked up the mountainside backwards with its face looking at her." And he's just like, "What the heck is wrong with this guy?" And I was just like, I'm never gonna see this guy again. I don't freaking care.
Yeah, get
Um,
weird.
yeah, so that was a fun journey, and we actually did have a lot of crazy stuff happen on that trip. We actually came across a missing person case that we're actually still investigating, but it has a lot of missing 411 vibes on it. So so far we are having things happen, and I'm thinking it's because we give ourselves an entire week to put ourselves in an environment that has known activity. I think that's the main thing. Like I'm not just going down to my street corner and sitting on the side of the road hoping that Bigfoot bites my leg off in the middle of town. Like we're going out into areas that people talk about things happening. And when you put yourself there for a week period of time, you put the odds in your favor, I guess. But anyways, see, this is what happens when I just start talking. This is
I love
ADHD. It just goes all over the place. So I can tell you my kids' middle names next if you'd like to know.
it.
But no, back to the Shape of Shadows. So what happened there was, I think it was episode 299. I had a guy named Ryan Burns on the show, and he actually owns Space Wolf Research. And what happened with him is he was out in the Utah area. I'm going to summarize. It's better for him to tell his own story because I wasn't there. But he was out in Utah and he sees this like elderly person with almost like a blanket over their head or something walking down the road. And he's in his truck and he's like, "Oh, let me pull over and see if they're okay." And this is in the Skinwalker Ranch area, the Uinta Basin. And so he pulls over and he asks, "Hey, are you okay? Do you need a ride?" And they get in the truck and they look at him. And then the next thing he knows, he's hanging out of his truck in park. The person's gone and he's just like catatonic. The police show up, the native, the reservation police show up, and he tells them what happened. And they're like, "You got nabbed by a skinwalker." And he's like, "What the heck is a skinwalker?" And he starts researching it, and he gets so enticed by it that he saw that this property was for sale that borders against Skinwalker Ranch, and he's like, I gotta buy that. And
Wow.
so, he convinced, I don't know how he did it, but he convinced his wife to let him buy this. I think it was 10 acres at the time. He's added to it a couple times. I think it's over 20 acres now that he has, because
Okay.
he's added to it since we left. But yeah, it's been it was a pretty wild journey for him how he got started on this. And he hired, and now he lives out of state. He doesn't live up there.
Right.
I don't even know what he does for a living. I think it's something to do with real estate. It doesn't matter. He hires a caretaker for the property to take care of it and everything, and he goes through caretakers like crazy.
I would
Like,
imagine. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, they're like, he's like, hey, listen, portals pop up, dog man walks through portals. Sometimes Bigfoot is riding the dog man, and a UFO shooting lasers down at them. And they're and the character's like, okay. And then all of a sudden, three dogmen step over the fence on the property line, and they're like, I'm out,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that
I'm
literally
good. Yeah.
that literally happened. I mean, not the UFO part. That was sarcasm, but I mean, maybe, you know. But so what happened with, I think it was his first caretaker, one of his first caretakers. They had a friend over at the house on the property, and basically three dogmen show up to the border of the property. They step over the fence, and he opens fire on them, and it did nothing to him, absolutely nothing. And they were out. But then they gave Ryan the idea of, hey, you know what? Let me think about not um allowing people to shoot at these things. Let's create a
Yeah.
safe haven. And so he told me that I wasn't allowed to have guns out there. So we abide by the rules. And so we went into Skinwalker, Dogman, Bigfoot, Portal, UFO, Haven. And because his whole idea was he was trying to create an environment for these things to exist on his property without any repercussions so that he could study it. And we agreed to go out there. So we went out there underneath those conditions. And that's kind of like the story of how the property came into being. A week before we go out, though, he calls me and tells me that there's like a 20-foot, no, it's like a 40-foot container on the property he was using, I guess, for storage or whatever, and it's sitting next to a shed. And he's like, hey, I just want to let you know the container that we have on the property lifted up and rotated and moved down the property, and we have no idea how. And I was like, no idea, bro. And he's
Yeah.
like, no idea. And so we go out there, and Joseph starts calling like heavy machinery operating companies that rent out machinery, and none of them rented out anything recently that could do that, let alone for that area. And the only way onto the property is through the caretaker fence, the little driveway there. And Bo, I know but for your audience, like I used to be a tractor trailer driver before I was running Merkel Media, and on scene, I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, how would I get this heavy machinery in here? Because you're not just gonna drive it there. You're
Right.
not just gonna, take it, put it in the back of your pickup truck. This is something that like a tractor trailer needs to bring. And so if I was gonna take my truck on that property, any driver worth anything wouldn't pull into that property. They would back in. You always want to have that easy way out. And it's actually easier to back into properties that have narrow entrances than it is to pull in, because you misjudge the pull in part, but the back end part, if you lead with the trailer, it's a lot easier to kind of get your nose where you're at, and it's easier to push it from behind, essentially. So, anyways, that's your CDL course today. So, if I was backing it in, though, I wouldn't do it in one shot. It was a very narrow gate, and I would have had to wiggle it in, which means pulling forward, backing up, readjusting.
Right.
You're hearing the air brakes go. You're hearing the truck pop the air brakes to get out and look at the back of the truck to see where you are actually located, because you're not just going to rely on the mirrors. You're going to get in and out. It would have taken a while, and the caretaker would have heard it. The caretaker would have known, and the caretaker's like, I didn't hear anybody come on. This thing just moved on its own.
Wow.
And so that kicked off the whole week, which was amazing because we weren't even there, and it was just like popping. Joseph gets out there early with Christian, and Christian and Joseph were setting things up, and they set up a set of binoculars, and these binoculars were overshooting the valley off the property in the direction of Skinwalker Ranch. And we had well, they had, I wasn't there yet. We were driving out there. Um, Christian just had put up his iPhone to the binoculars to film what was just, just kind of get footage, I guess. I don't know, for his phone. He wasn't trying to make footage with his iPhone for the film, but it happened to be just that, because
Right.
just as he put his phone up to the binoculars, Joseph said he saw with his naked eye something very large and white drop down from the sky vertically. It shoot across horizontally and then shoot straight up. And just as Christian put up his phone recording, he caught it shooting directly across the frame,
Yeah.
and it was a white object. When you look at it with the trees around it, it doesn't look much smaller than the trees. It's pretty large, and so we don't know exactly what it is. And I could, my logical part of my brain would want to say like, okay, well maybe it was a bird flying really fast or something. But the problem with that is Joseph's account. Joseph saw it drop straight down, shoot straight across, and then shoot straight up.
Right.
That's not a bird, and so that was before we got there. I would say that when I got a phone call driving through Nebraska or whatever state we were in from Joseph telling us that they caught that on footage, I breathed really easy. I was like, oh, thank God.
Going to be a
We
good
got
week.
something on video, I was like, so if nothing else happens the rest of the week, we can build a storyline around this UFO we caught on video in broad daylight. And if nothing else happens, all of a sudden that happened the last day. We'll walk them through this whole film and like, in our last day, we caught a UFO.
Right.
But didn't have to do that. We had gotten out there, we were setting up, and we just kind of toured around the property. And it was just a good time talking, hanging out during the day, catching up with each other, meeting Joseph for the first time. I mean, I talked to him plenty of times before that, but never in person.
Right.
And we were just kind of getting familiar with each other. And nighttime comes and we have a fire going, and we're getting ready to exist in the environment. That's our philosophy. That's how we do things. I mean, we try to do experimental stuff, but we're not real tech savvy. Let's just put it that way. I mean, we're not really. Let's put it this way: like, we don't know what we're messing with, and we're very hesitant to do something that could be crossing a line that we're not supposed to be crossing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so we just want to play it safe, and so we do things, and I think we're gonna push boundaries that even just being out there, people to reprimand us. They're like, you shouldn't even be bothering messing with this stuff. Everybody's got their calling in life. I feel like this is mine. So,
There you go.
but we're out there. We're kind of hanging around the fire, and I'm hoping things, we can see a UFO in the sky that night or something. And before we start really kind of settling into the whole existing in the moment, sky watching, getting the night camera vision out, or night vision cameras out, I remembered that I had game trail cams, and I wanted to set them up, but it was dark out, and I didn't want to go by myself. And after kind of pulling straws, it came down to Ward, and and I said, Ward, hold me. And he
Well,
held my hand, and
he's a jujitsu guy anyway, so he.
yeah. Listen, there's not a whole lot of guys that I would prefer over Ward, so he and I go down this hill into the darkness. I mean, I'm talking, it's pitch black out.
Yeah.
And I mean, maybe not too pitch black. I mean, I think there was moonlight, but it was dark. And we go down across this creek, down around this path, down into the forest or whatever it was in the desert. I don't know what you call these tree areas in the desert. But I find a spot that overlooked an area that we had seen other stuff that day. Because earlier in the day, we found a trackway that seemed to transition from human to horse. Now, remember, we're out there looking for skinwalkers, shapeshifters.
Yeah.
And my first reaction to it was somebody was walking with their horse back here. The more I looked at it and the more Joel showed me, because Joel, I believe, is the one that found it first, it became apparent that that's not what we're dealing with, because what happened is the ground must have been extremely saturated at one point where a person could be standing and their foot just sinks right into the mud. And that's what we see. We see these human footprints that are inches deep in the mud. It wasn't just very shallow, it was inches, like 3-4 inches deep. And you see the feet turn sideways, like they're standing parallel with the trail, and then they turn like they're going to walk down this little hill off trail, and it's human. And then it all of a sudden the human trail is gone, and in its place is hooves like a horse. And my logical brain, I was trying to be like, okay, so this was probably somebody with a horse that they hopped on their horse and they rode away, and that's why the human prints disappear. But that quickly got erased when I realized that if that's the case, if I'm seeing human footprints, I should be seeing horse footprints near the human footprints.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, so this is interesting. And we had some natives showing us around the whole week, two different guys, Johnny and Bo, and we brought them out separately to investigate it with us, to see it for themselves. And both of them separately confirmed that they believe it was a shapeshifter, a skinwalker. And so that's why I wanted to have that game trail cam kind of shooting in that direction. Cause I was like, well, if it was there once, maybe it's going to be there again. We can catch it on camera, even if it's just a person. Like if we could just see a person walking in that same path, we can be like, maybe that's the person that transformed, you know? Again, we're trying to document the experience of existing in the environment. So we cross this bridge with a creek, and we find a nice little tree, and I am standing there and I'm looking at the tree, and I'm trying to gauge, you know, where I want to set the camera up on the tree, but I want to get it higher, so I'm gonna have to climb the tree. And because I'm gonna have to climb the tree, I just kind of look over my shoulder because Ward's there to kind of watch my back, and Ward is Mr. Security guy. Like, I mean, that's his mindset. And so there's no doubt in my mind, Ward is right there to take care of me. But, you know, I just want to check. And I look around, I'm like, Ward, you good, right? And I look and he's gone. I'm like, Ward, you know? and I see probably about, I don't know, 20, 30 feet away. Ward is standing with his back towards me. Now he has a hoodie on, so his hands are in his pockets of his hoodie. So I'm seeing his back. His hands are in his hoodie pocket and his head's down and looking at the ground. Talk about eerie, right? Like,
yeah, man.
Like, is he like in a trance or something? Did Ward become like susceptible to something? Because if Ward became susceptible to something, we were all doomed, you know? Yeah. Like Ward, like I look to Ward, I'm like, hey Ward, what's the Hebrew word of this verse in the Bible? And he's like, oh yeah, let me just pull that out of my Rolodex. Like I got that, you know?
Yeah, man, he's something, ain't he?
Oh, I love him. So he comes, he's standing there, and I look down at the ground then to see what he's looking at, and I see a skull, like a cow skull. And I'm like, oh, dead cow, you know? And I said to him, is that what I think it is? And he just goes, yep. And that's how he said it. He's like, yep. Like he thought I saw what he saw in the moment, and I didn't. And so I was like, oh, cool. We found a skull. We're going to carry that up, show the guys, hey, look what we found, you know, document the experience. Well, I hung the camera and I walk over to Ward, and I obviously it becomes very apparent to me that that's not what he's looking at entirely. He's not looking at a cow skull. He's looking at many bones in a circle laid out to be a ritual circle. And there was a bowl in the middle with like I don't know, like tobacco. There was some change, like they were offering things. I don't know what I don't know what this stuff is. I don't know. It looked creepy. And so I'm like, oh shoot. So he takes his phone out, and it took a good night picture of it. And so you can see it really clear. You know, the low light cameras on these phones are freaking awesome now. Which, by the way, I think that's amazing, but and this is totally off subject, but I find it fascinating that you can be out in pitch black, and all you need is just a little bit of moonlight, a little bit of starlight, any kind of light whatsoever. And these cameras on your phones can just, if you hold still long enough and let it do its thing, whatever it's doing, it takes amazing night vision pictures. I'm just like, this is super cool for what we do. So that's what he did. And we go up to the camp, and we start talking to the guys, and we start sharing with them, you know, what we found. And everybody's kind of getting the creeps, and Bo was there, and he had the creeps. And I believe it was Christian that was holding, no, it wasn't Christian, it was somebody else. Somebody was holding Ward's phone, looking at the pictures that we took. And And this is on camera because by now Ward is documenting and filming everybody looking at the pictures that we took. And I believe it was Christian at this moment that said, "Look in the sky, look at the mesa," or something like that. And across the valley, there was a light shooting up into the sky, and this is like a giant spotlight. And it's like it. You know how like when like car dealerships have like they just opened up a brand new car dealership, and they got those spotlights that swing around the sky, and you see it for miles. You're like, and when you're kids, you're like, oh, I wonder where that goes. And it's like trying to look for gold at the end of a rainbow. You're like, I just want to go. And your mom and dad are like, no, we got to go home and go to bed. And it's like, oh, man, I just want to see where the light comes from. Well, that's what this was like, only it wasn't as strong of a beam, but it was much wider. From my perspective, it probably was whatever was shooting this off from ground level was probably about 30, 40, 50 feet wide. I mean, it was very wide. It wasn't a spotlight. This was something giving off a massive amount of light from a very wide perspective that we were able to see it from where we were. And
I didn't realize that. Maybe I missed that detail, but I didn't realize the size of that.
So I told the guys that were editing, I said, don't tell them everything because I gotta be able to talk about stuff on interview.
Well, that worked.
So yeah, I mean that was the first thing that we saw, and we got a picture of that. That's in the film. And right when we're looking at that, that's when the sky lit up, and Joel is just going bonkers. Like Joel's like, look at the lights, and they're changing colors. They're going up and down, side to side, all over the place. And it was like probably an hour or two of just crazy light experiences in the sky. And that's the hardest thing that I imagine it is to edit these films, which I don't edit them at all, which is good for everybody. But you have so much footage. How do you decide what goes, what stays? You know, like there were things that were cut that, you know, I probably been like, how can we squeak this in there? But it just doesn't fit the vibe and the whole narrative, you know? And so it's a difficult thing. That's what takes so long. But so that all starts happening and popping off that night then. And we do wonder, like, did finding that circle, that ritual circle, kick off things? You know, like what was it? Was it a trigger? At least that's how I view it. I mean, like maybe not view it, but like that's how what I consider. I'm like, was it something that got triggered? Did we trigger something? And so that whole night goes on, and we have crazy experiences, and we go to sleep. We set up our tents, or not our tents. One tent is a 12-man tent that I got, so we could all sleep together. So nobody was lonely, nobody was scared, and we set up our 12-foot man tent, or 12-foot man, 12-man. No,
Nephilim tent.
You got it. That's what it was. Basically, we had a Nephilim tent that could fit one Nephilim giant or 12 human men. We set it up right next to the container that was there that moved, and we're like, well, let's see if we're here in the morning, if it squishes us, you know. Thankfully, it didn't. But what's interesting about that container is we weren't expecting this, but at some point during the week, we got to meet. I'm blanking on his names now. His name is James. I feel bad, but James came out, and he was doing studies on the land, and he was trying to measure the magnetic anomalies under the ground.
Yeah,
and he's been doing this for a long time. And James Keenan, there it is. And so he comes out and kind of tells us, you know, the information that he's collected, and that's in the documentary. And I'm not even going to go into it because I really couldn't regurgitate it. Like it was one of those situations where I was standing there and he's talking, and I'm just like, I have no idea what he's saying. Like,
it's cool information, but it's like,
I'm just like, I'm like nodding my head, I'm scrunching my brow, I'm like, yeah, this is really good stuff, man, thank you. And I'm like, I have no idea what you're saying, man, you're too smart for me. And so he's out here telling us all about this magnetic anomaly, which is the first time we're hearing about it. And it kind of started making sense then what happened with the container, possibly.
It does.
He said that some of the strongest readings is where that container was sitting. And James Keenan is actually on the Skinwalker Ranch show. I think season 5, I think it is. they brought him in to measure magnetic anomalies on the ranch, and he found weird stuff. And it happens to line up directly with this property that we were on. It's like a straight line of these weird anomalies.
And something else weird about that container, and I hope I'm not giving anything away.
No,
there's no drag marks.
Mm-mm.
Where this thing's rotated like 45 degrees or 90 degrees. There's no drag marks. The grass isn't pulled up. It's just lifted, rotated, and sat back down. Right.
Yeah.
That's what blew my mind.
Yeah. So
I thought, okay, there's got to be rocks. There's got to be something. There's no track.
No. And so it had to be lifted, right? But the interesting thing is there was like 2 or 3 rocks that were kind of big, and they did have scrape marks just on the top, but not enough for them to move. And these rocks aren't giant boulders. They were like, they fit in the palm of my hand,
Right.
And they weren't hit enough to move, just enough to scrape the top. And so it was lifted off the ground, but not too high. It's only about 3 or 4 inches, but so it levitated 2 to 3 inches off the ground, maybe 4 inches off the ground. It levitated, shifts down maybe about 15, 20 feet, and turns a 90-degree angle, and then gets dropped.
Yeah, that's wild.
So I mean, like if it was a machinery, you would lift that bad boy up higher, really, and swing it out away from the shed, because you don't want to damage the shed, right? Unless you're trying to damage the shed, if you're a nefarious person doing silly stuff. But we don't believe that's the case. But what happened was this thing lifted up, turned, moved down, and when it dropped, it actually dropped into the shed. And I'm not sure if that actually made the film or not, but the shed was damaged. It was bent in on the roof, and it definitely made contact with the shed. And so it wasn't done very carefully, but at the same time, it was, in the sense that it just levitated just a little bit. So that tells you that it probably was some kind of anomaly. Maybe the magnetic field kind of pushed it up or whatever. I don't know. Former truck driver turned podcaster filmmaker. I don't know much about that stuff. But where was I going here? You took me down that road, but what was
Sorry. I'm horrible at that.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It was good information to share, and I forgot to share that before. But so, all right, let's just go back to the night. We were camping next to the container and all that. Yeah. So, we had James come out, and he was doing the measurements on the ground. But I'll actually, I'll get to the ground part. There's another ground part later that I'll get to, but I want to save that for a little bit later, because it happened after we left. So we were camping next to the container the whole week, hoping to get squashed, and nothing happened. We go through the week, we do investigations, we go around the area. There was neighbors across the street that we had a chance to talk with, and they talked about seeing dogs, like weird looking dogs, walking through the property we were on. They've had things happen in their house, and it becomes apparent that this is not something that is just a Sherman Ranch, Skinwalker Ranch thing. This is something that goes deep throughout the whole area. Maybe I should have said this in the beginning, but the little bit of a history here is the Shermans bought this ranch back in the 90s, mid 90s. I always forget the year. I think it was 96. They bought this ranch, and they were the first white people to own this property. And it's part of a reservation. And so you're not supposed to sell the property of the reservation off to the white people. Like you have very few acreage left that you're allowed to have. And then, but they bought it, and then they had no idea what happened in that area, though. And then all of a sudden this stuff starts happening on their property, and they start making a big deal about it. And so all these other people who aren't from the area start looking at the property, and they're like, wow, what's up with this property, this ranch? And what's really cool is that our week out there, I believe we showed the world that it's not just the ranch, it's the entire area. And people across the street from Space Wolf Research that live in their own home, they have experiences. People on Space Wolf Research have experiences. People on the other side of the mesa have experiences. It's all over the place. It's just that it was popularized because the Shermans made a big deal about it, and the natives are like, yeah, that happens all the time. We just don't talk about it, idiot. So they sell it off to Bigelow. Bigelow sells it to the current owner. and that's how we got here. But the fact is that the whole area has this activity, and we go through the week and we're visiting the whole area. We saw some pretty cool stuff, man. It really was. It was just a really cool week. And you talk to some of the natives out there. Like, we went to this one coffee shop, I think every morning. And I think the first morning the guys were asking them like, "Hey, so what do you think about Skinwalker Ranch?" And they're just like, somebody else, bro, not me,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
uh, but our last night there, we were hoping to have like a grand finale. And we were hoping that, it would be like that first night. And we were like, it's gonna happen. And unfortunately, we really didn't get to the nighttime. I mean, we did technically, but everything kind of went haywire beforehand. And this kind of goes to that lore and legend as well, which is the whole idea of the governmental aspect, the men in black, these other shadow entities that don't want to be known that they're there, but they're there watching over things. I'm not talking about paranormal entities. I'm talking about like people.
Yeah.
So I don't remember where we're coming from. Maybe we were coming from Walmart or something. I have no idea. It was dark out and it was our last night, and we were excited about having our last night on Space Wolf research.
Yeah.
And we're driving down these dirt roads now. I mean, to get to Space Wolf research, every road is like barely paved. I mean, they're dirt roads, not well maintained. And it's out in the middle of nowhere. It's the desert. Like, there's nothing around. I'm driving back to base camp, and we turn into that gate I was talking about earlier, past the caretaker's house. And just as we got past the caretaker's house, Joel's in the back seat, and he goes, "Tony, stop the car." I'm like, "Stop the car, okay." He gets out. I'm thinking, I don't know what I'm thinking. It's Joel. I mean, Joel's a guy, like, Joel will just do his own thing, man. Like, and that's what I love about him. Like, he's just his own spirit.
Yeah.
And he gets out, and he doesn't do anything other than stand there facing the road that we just turned off of, with his hand on top of my forerunner, just staring. And then for a few seconds, then he gets back in. I'm like, "You all right, man?" And he's like, "Yeah," in the Joel way. Like, Joel's not hype. He's just like, "Yeah, man." Like, he's just real cool. Like he's like, "Not a big deal, but it is a big deal." He's like, "When we were driving down the road, I saw this car turn on its lights and pull out behind us from some dirt road." And I was like, "Really?" And he's like, "Yeah." And when we pulled into the gate here, I was watching it, and it just stopped behind the gate and just stared at us as we drove down further. And I was like, "Are you serious?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Well, boys, our wives are halfway across the country. Let's go. Cowboy up."